It's a special treat, first of all, to introduce Tom Siebel, who is the CEO of C3 and whose brainchild this Digital Transformation Institute is. Tom, of course, has had a distinguished career as an entrepreneur, and before I list all of those, the first thing I want to say is that he is an alum of the University of Illinois. I know there's lots of University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign having all three of his degrees from the University of Illinois, but he has a distinguished career as one of the legendary entrepreneurs of the Valley in Silicon Valley. And several startups. One in particular was Siebel Systems, which merged with Oracle in 2006 and grew with one of the fastest growing software company, the fastest growing software company, with annual revenues exceeding $2 billion. He is also the founder and chair of the Thomas and Stacy Siebel Foundation, which has been instrumental in creating several programs, the Siebel Scholars, the Meth Project, and numerous other programs for the homeless and the underprivileged. He's currently, of course, the chairman and CEO of C3.ai, and which is an enterprise platform as a service and software as a service software company, which a lot of you have enjoyed using the suite and coming up with all these wonderful and innovative techniques. And today he'll be joined in conversation, please, Tom, in conversation with Anup Sharma, the Senior VP of Global Business Services at Lyondell Basel, and he focuses on advancing competitiveness globally, on commercial and operational capabilities, as well as global talent. And he leads a company-wide approach on value creation through continuous transformation, especially through the digital approach to value creation through continuous digitalization. And Detlef also got us started on this. And I think at the beginning, we thought we'd have you be on stage. And I think the initial part was to talk about cybersecurity, digital transformation. And I think whichever way, please.
Let's do this. Thank you, Shankar.
And just in terms of a format, please, well, welcome. What I thought we'd have you do is to both have some initial statements of 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll have questions from the audience and a conversation with you. Please.
I'm just wondering how Tom manages to look younger in person than his picture. I went the other way. So,
Anup, come on, have a seat, buddy.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Well, it's this cybersecurity thing. It's getting a little hot in the kitchen, isn't it? You know, it's kind of fascinating how you guys have noticed in the last 3 weeks that the United States government has made a decision to declassify information that they have never declassified before, and to publish this information as it relates to this little skirmish going on in the Ukraine. And they've done a pretty good job of announcing about a week in advance everything this guy's going to do. And they have been uncannily accurate in these predictions. And so now Putin's got to be freaking out. And I understand he's put his head of their equivalent of the CIA is under house arrest. And he's got to be getting a little nervous because things are pretty leaky around the Kremlin. And so I think it was quite disturbing on Monday, you will have noticed these announcements coming out from the White House that we need to be concerned about attacks on critical infrastructure in the United States. That was Monday and Tuesday. And then they doubled down on that with the FBI today coming out and talking about expectations of attacks on critical infrastructure. And, it's pretty problematic, pretty scary, pretty real. Andreas and Rashid and Bill and Shanker and I and some others have been involved in another philanthropic organization that we have called Siebel Scholars, where we've given out, I think, a couple thousand scholarships now to the top graduate students in computer science and graduate schools of business and environmental science and biomedical science, biomedical engineering at some of the leading universities in the world, including Berkeley and Stanford and MIT and Princeton and Carnegie Mellon and University of Chicago, University of Illinois, and some others. And we have held conferences over the years on threats to critical infrastructure. For those of you who have been reading, the Wall Street Journal has been covering this, extensively. There's a book out there called The Perfect Weapon. You might have read it, by David Sanger, where he talks about every state-sanctioned cybersecurity event that has taken place. It's kind of a history of that. It's a page-turning book written by David Sanger. And he covers everything from Stuxnet, which is, I think, maybe our work, with the help of the Israelis, and it kind of finishes up with SolarWinds. But in the middle, he covers the OPM hack, covers the Sony hack, the North Korean hack of Sony, and pretty much every one of them. And every one of them kind of boiled down to phishing attacks. 100% of them are phishing attacks. And the stories, they're just unbelievable. Where, in the OPM, Office of Personnel Management, as you know, I think the Chinese got in and walked off with the records of 21 million personnel records of everybody who's ever been considered for or been awarded a security clearance by the United States government. And they got in, believe it or not, through a phishing attack into the Department of the Interior, okay? And they found all these records on computers that were in the Department of the Interior. Now, how OPM, Office of Personnel Management, was using excess computers on the Department of Interior, of course, they hadn't changed the password since the Vietnam War, and none of the data were encrypted. These stories are just unbelievable, okay? So they go in, they camp out for 6 months. The Chinese camp out for 6 months. They encrypt all the data, okay, that were not encrypted. They then leave. They leave the back doors. They leave, okay, and then they transmit all the data to China encrypted, okay, and by the time, okay, and then they're gone, and nobody even knows the data were missing until the whole thing is over. And you can't make this stuff up. SolarWinds, nobody will even talk about that, right? They were in, RNC, DNC, White House, DOD, DOE, and nobody will even talk about it. Okay, that's how big a deal that is. Okay, you get into, there's another book out there by the name of Nicole Perlroth. She lives in, another New York Times writer. Okay, and she lives in Portola Valley, which is out near Austin, California. And This Is How They Tell Me the World Ends is the title of the book. And she was on the staff of the New York Times. And she was given all the documents from the Snowden documents. Okay, and that apparently it went to The Guardian. And The Guardian didn't want to touch it. So somehow it all comes back to the New York Times. And these guys went in into a into a conference room in the New York Times. If you've ever been in the New York Times building in New York, it's all transparent. You can see through it. There's supposed to be something transparent about it. But yeah, they covered all the conference room with papers so they could not be surveilled. And they go through all these documents of what ultimately the Soviets got, okay, through Snowden. And not only did they get they got all this information about kind of the shenanigans that the NSA were playing with, personal privacy that we all know about now, and phone records. But they also got information from the U.S. Cyber Command. U.S. Cyber Command is about offensive weaponry, and this is where the Russians, got the technology where they've been using basically Estonia and the Ukraine as basically test ranges. They went into Estonia, shut down the financial system, shut down the government system, shut down the grid. Okay, they did the same thing a couple of years ago in the Ukraine, you might recall. Okay, where they just shut down the grid. And she said that was just a test range. They're just testing to see that this stuff worked. And if you read, there was another book out there called Lights Out by Follett. Is it Ken Follett, the journalist? Yeah. And where he talks about the penetration of the grid. I mean, it's well understood that the U.S. grid infrastructure is completely penetrated with bots and malware and backdoors, where the grid infrastructure can be turned off from a cell phone, in Moscow like tomorrow. It might happen. And you turn off the consequences of shutting off the U.S. grid are 9 out of 10 people in the United States die. Basically, all the supply chain shut down, all the security systems shut down, all the police systems shut down. I think it like turns into Mad Max kind of thing, where it's like every person for himself or herself. But that's the consequences of this happening, and this idea that this might be happening like, the warnings are that this could be happening like this week. I mean, get your mind around this. I mean, this is like real. And I know there's all this discussion going on that this guy Putin is crazy. I'm not sure if he's crazy or not, but it doesn't really matter. He's certainly cornered. And he miscalculated this Ukraine event horribly. And he's alone, and he's cornered. And so I think the topics that all you are engaged in right now are, particularly timely. And, we have it on, we spoke with, Secretary Rice was here today. Ed Cardone is here today. Ed used to run the U.S. Cyber Command. I think you guys spoke with General Moore this morning, right?
Yeah.
And I talked to him last night. I know that, Ed Cardone talked with Paul Nakasone last night. Paul, as you know, General Nakasone runs the U.S. Cyber Command today and the National Security Agency. And the word is, this is real. So be afraid. And so this little gathering we're having turned out to be a little bit more timely than we thought. So I know you think you had a year to complete this project. Newsflash, you don't have a year, okay? Mm-hmm. So whatever, newsflash, you can forget about that. Whatever schedule you have, you better put the pedal to the metal because the problems you're working on are absolutely existential. And it's now. And I mean, it's almost hard to believe that this could be happening as we're meeting, right? So, I have, took great pleasure, okay, in reading, all of your proposals. And after Shankar and Shrikant, Bill and Anantha and all you guys had, done all your kind of Nemiwashi peer review process that you do in the academy. And thank you for that. But I think the work that you're working on is exciting, it's important, it's critical, and I would just ask you, I know you have other priorities, but, please, put this at the top of your list because honestly, all of our lives might depend upon it. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, and, Anoop is basically effectively the COO at about a $20 billion petrochemical company based in Houston. These people have been involved in engaging at a digital transformation at a global scale of applying AI to the kind of the business processes of both supply chain, demand chain, and production of hydrocarbons and polymers. Are they polymers? Is that a fair statement?
Yep.
And it is a privilege to be able to work with Anoop and his team. And these guys are the absolute masters of the universe at this game. And he thinks a lot about cyber. And I know he was involved with a briefing with the federal government this morning, so he is on top of this on a daily basis. And so, Anoop, let me turn this over to you for comment.
Thank you, Tom. First, I'll just echo it's late in the afternoon. You've been through many presentations, but I just want to say thank you. We talk a lot about national interest, critical infrastructure. As just one of the many industries represented here, a big thank you to all of you. It's also great to see diversity in this room. May I just say that out loud? It was not too long ago where 98% of girls in middle school, and I'm a dad of two girls, were told that cybersecurity was probably not a good career for them. Imagine there are 4 million open jobs in cybersecurity today. So we're, as Tom said, we're about 46 billion in revenue, actually.
Oh, 46?
Okay.
Oh, off by a factor
The year
of
before
two.
it was less than that.
Off by a factor of 2. Holy moly.
But it's cyclical.
That was a slap. That was a slap down. Okay. So noted. I'm sorry.
And, I'll say the cyber threat, much like many risks, is not a new threat. I spent some years in the nuclear industry. There's incredible technology in the United States, in the world, that we've done over a period of time with a lot of innovation, R&D, many people like you, and for a nation state or people to try to take the shortcut and steal it. So kind of quick story. What Tom said is spot on. So I had the privilege of being in a business that, a small company called General Electric. Oil and gas was very different, distributed, customers all over the world. And it was a well-known fact that this was the most attacked business unit in the company at the time. And frankly, the ways we had done securing infrastructure, so that in the nuclear industry, you air gap. You assume, well, if these things don't talk to each other, then there's very little to no risk. Well, after 2 years, we got a call from the FBI. I can talk about this now, it's old. Got a call from the FBI. They'd been watching a nation state for 2 years through a lab environment where there was a pinhole set up to exchange data one time with a supplier. It was last minute. It was non-destructive testing equipment done on aircraft maintenance. There was incredibly innovative X-ray technology that nation state had been trying to get their hands on for at least 15 years. And somebody in the lab decided at the last minute they needed to exchange data once, and that pinhole was left open. So you can imagine the consternation at the highest levels in the company. It's been 2 years. There was a pattern of theft of IP. And so I think we had a bit of a decision to make. So IT was very separate from OT, the operations in the factory. And I got the privilege of talking to the GE board and the chairman about why we, of course, failed. I think, though, there's learning in that. And I'll tell you, once we realize the intent, but also the capacity of the enemy to try to steal secrets, export control secrets, nuclear technology, we found 35 plants where we had these gaps, right? So, we're a company, like I said, we have a 100-year-old refinery. When the refinery was built, there was no technology to exchange information. It was inherently safe. Today, we want to generate value. We want to create efficiency. We want to optimize value chains. And for that, we have to share data. But the risk still exists. So, I'd say for us, our view, and I'd maybe encourage all of you to help us get better, is a risk-based view. So we have a protective view. So we think about trust as in zero trust. We have to assume that things are compromised. We want to protect all data, but we focus on the most important data. Safety, reliability, intellectual property that's critical to our company, that's a competitive advantage. And then I think it's the people. So in the audience are a few of my colleagues. I'd say 3 years ago when I joined Lyondell, the board was very interested in our capabilities. And we were okay, but the biggest risk that has emerged in the last 3 years with the promise of digital has been the significant increase, step change risk in cybersecurity. And so I'm not sure we're that innovative, but we are told that some of the things we've done in the last few years would be considered best practice. So I can maybe list 3 things and be open to your inputs and insights. One is we have a single team. So cybersecurity was embedded in IT, was within manufacturing, never got the funding, the focus, and most importantly, independence. So we have a completely independent function that is, we report out to the board every quarter, to the audit committee. Twice a year, we do a deep dive with our board of directors. We have a very, very focused and well-informed leadership team. And I think because of the risks to the enterprise, right? You can imagine a large chemical plant with critical infrastructure. Bad things happen when nefarious actors come into the enterprise. So I think we've created a single independent organization. Second thing, we have really opened the way we think about partnering with suppliers, experts, the government, C3 AI. How do we make sure that we bring the best to help us protect against the bad guys? And then the third thing is really about talent. And when I look around this room, I get really excited. The investment in universities, high schools. I'll tell you a quick story. We had, like anybody else in Houston, Texas, or in Rotterdam, or in different parts of the world, trying to recruit cybersecurity talent is complicated. Lots of very expensive talent. And what we realized was the best talent was in the universities. Very open to learning, not biased on how the old ways were. And in the last 4 years, we've done some really great work with local universities, the HBUs, built a great pipeline of talent. I have to say, in the last 4 to 5 years, those people are not just in entry-level jobs, they are running our cybersecurity operation. So it's a kind of 3 things again, Tom, just to echo what you said. You have to really think about this at the highest levels of enterprise risk, with a board, hopefully, and a management team that's focused. But I think this notion of independence and a core capability in the organization, how do you really make sure that you get the best from all parties, not kind of build walls, but really collaborate in the space to defeat the bad guys, because they don't care if it's C3 or INZZ. They're out to kind of destroy what we're used to. And the third thing is talent. So those are my comments. Shankar, I hope that was...
Can I just respond? Yeah. Because, a theme, this is the 3rd call of C3DTI, but what came among, so we had people reporting on awards largely from the energy call. A dominant message was the number of new vulnerabilities that are being introduced. And that mirrors what both of you said about how digital transformation has really changed how we do business. But the vulnerability stack has gotten so much more, and both General Moore and General Cardone yesterday really challenged this community to start thinking about the systems view. And we're a tech push community, by and large, people doing technology work. And they both challenged us, General Moore this morning and General Cardone yesterday, about really needing to, as we develop technology, to not just be reactive, but to really come up with a science of security. And the NSA, of course, has sort of made this a mantra. It calls it SOS, for science of security. Maybe it's just what it sounds like. And so I think, while we are waiting for the audience to warm up, what is your sense about, digital transformation is what I think all industry needs. But are we sort of accelerating the set of vulnerabilities for ourselves as we do this digital transformation?
At the risk of oversimplifying this, okay, and I do not, I am not an expert in cybersecurity, okay? But I have read a little bit about it. As far as I can tell, the state of the art is we have this DevCon community, okay? And this DevCon community are these, people who, generally they weigh about 90 pounds and they wear black t-shirts and they like slam Red Bull all night, okay? And, go for like days at a time, trying to find ways to like hack into systems, okay? And I don't think they're doing it maliciously. I think they're doing it because this is their idea of a good time, like to figure out how to break into Windows or SAP or, or whatever it might be. I think this is their idea of fun. And then there is, now it's described in some detail in the Nicole Pooroth book that I told you about. So this DevCon community that of these hackers that find these ways to burrow into these systems, okay? And they take great pride in this accomplishment. And then there's a gray market for these strings, okay? And they sell for like, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, $100,000 of the gray market in these strings. These strings get consolidated on a blacklist. Okay, WannaCry, whatever it might be, it gets consolidated on a blacklist. And then all of the cybersecurity companies basically share the same blacklist, whether it's ArcSight or Mandiant or whatever Mandiant used to be called. Okay, and they have a blacklist. So if you look at the state of the art, okay, in cybersecurity, we're looking at basically 1980 level technology. I mean, it's pretty scary. We have basically it could be a relational database. Today it's in memory today. Okay, today it's done in memory. Okay, so we do some more advanced technologies, but essentially, okay, usually at the firewall, we're just examining strings as they're coming through the firewall, looking it up in the list, doing a database. Is it WannaCry or is it not? True. Okay, if it's WannaCry, you don't let it in. If it's not WannaCry, you let it through. That's it, guys. Okay, so is there anything that we haven't seen before makes it in, okay, into the perimeter. And I've talked to Paul Nakasone about this. I've talked to Ed Cardone, and I'm pretty sure this is the way these systems work. Okay, now if you look on the internet, you'll see all of these companies that are supposedly using AI for this purpose, and yes, they were able to raise $1, $2, $50, whatever million in funding, but they don't have anything that works. Okay, now, when we think about phishing attacks or worms or bots or whatever these things might be, I mean, this looks to me like a natural, this is a supervised learning problem. I mean, there's got to be some patterns here that we can recognize of all the signals to identify this string that we haven't seen, either due to patterns in timing, or a sequence of things where we can identify phishing attacks that we haven't identified yet as a phishing attack, or whatever it might be, where we develop, machine learning models to identify strings that we haven't seen yet. And so this should be a layup for AI, right? That's really the nature of the opportunity. And I'm telling you, the state of the art is exactly what I said. Okay, and I just almost got in a full contact battle with somebody at Southcom yesterday who was trying to tell me Southcom is a Southern Command that runs all, South America, okay? And South American military operations. And this guy was telling me they're using AI for cybersecurity. I said, who are you kidding? Okay, it was a civilian. I said, who are you kidding? You might tell that to somebody in the building and they might believe you, but we both know it's not true. Okay, but that is the nature of the opportunity, and so I think there really is some low-hanging fruit here, and in the idea. So, I think there is an opportunity, for us to make, for you, okay, to make some really important contributions to the dialogue, and I hate to break it down to be that simple, but I think it isn't that simple. To
your point, Tom, General Moore said, he called it red archers. He says, can't you keep looking at patterns and do this attribution?
Identify the zero-day string.
Yeah,
or attribution. Why do we have to hire Kevin Mandia, okay, to spend 3 months and pay them $5 million to tell us which building it came from in St. Petersburg. I mean, we should be able to do that in milliseconds, right? Okay, in terms of attribution, I mean, how hard can that be? If you can do it with Kevin Mandy and 10 of it, everybody knows who Kevin Mandy, I think, is. Okay, he's a smart guy. Okay, and he's a really smart guy. Okay, but if he can do it with 10 people in 3 months, we should be able to do it with a computer in like a couple thousand milliseconds. Okay, and very much I think about what the FBI did today in this announcement, the White House did yesterday. I think that was an attribution call. I mean, that was a notice in advance that if it happens, we know it was you. Okay, and I think that's really what just happened there. So we're not going to take any time to think about who it was. We know it was you. I think that's what that was. Anyhow, attribution is another opportunity. Bill.
Well, first let me say thank you, Tom, and thank you, Anoop, for what an incredible topic to have as our final session for the day. This is great. I mean, not only is it going to keep us awake, it's terribly important. So, as you said, Tom, and I'm not going to try to answer your question. So I hope you didn't call on me to answer it.
No, you just had the mic in your hand, and and we're old friends, and so if not Bill, who?
Bill, tell us about what your attribution solutions are.
Yeah. No, well, I do have a startup company, Tom, I'll tell you about, but not in front of everybody. And we are working on this problem in the energy space for cybersecurity. But anyway, the question I'd like to ask both of you is, and I think you both gave us a really good assessment of, at least at the 10,000-foot level of where we are today. I wake up many mornings thinking about, why hasn't the bad thing happened in a big way already, right? Why hasn't it? Now, this is the kind of thing CNN calls me up and asks.
Because it's economically not in their best interest. That's why.
Exactly.
The Russians, economically, it hasn't been in their interest, and perhaps until now.
Yeah. So what I'd like you to comment on, we're all technology geeks, but that suggests what you just said, that there's a policy, a military strategy. There's a lot more we need to integrate in to thinking about this cybersecurity problem than just technology. And I'm not saying the technology problem...
Like, where's the red line? These guys have not said where the red line is. At what point is it an act of war?
Yeah. So
okay, that's not defined.
Right, exactly. So how can we...
I think they're afraid to define it because somebody's going to cross it. It's like, oh, damn, what are we going to do now?
No-fly zone,
Sorry.
right? But that's another thing. But how can we integrate that policy thinking, strategic thinking from leaders you've talked to? I think it's naive and incomplete just to work on our work from a technical point of view.
No,
so
I
should we
completely agree. There's important policy and military policy and social policy decisions here. And if you think that any of this is going to come out of the White House or the Congress or the Pentagon, you can forget about that. I mean, I spent a lot of time with these guys, and they are lost. I mean, you're it. You're all we got. And the good news is, it's a lot. Go ahead, Anoop.
Well,
he's the politically correct version of this pair. Okay.
It's interesting. When I joined Lyondell, I was given 2 risks for the company. So, large companies have enterprise-wide risks. And there's a bit of a paradox because the first was the opportunity. Shankar, you talked about, Dr. Shastri, you talked about opportunity. We think we can generate $1 billion of new value with C3 AI, with digital for the company. That is material. And that's reoccurring every year. So imagine you have the opportunity to create $1 billion plus of new value in an industry that is yesterday's industry in some ways in terms of technology. But I'm also accountable for the risk of cybersecurity. And I think you asked a great question. Pre-pandemic, it was low risk. We all went to work every day in a manufacturing site. The corporate team was in a building. Our systems, we'd never let anybody take a computer home. And then the pandemic happened. And then everybody was working from everywhere. And I think the threat surface for our company the risk magnified tremendously. It doesn't mean that you'll hear tomorrow, we'll talk about the amazing things we've done on digital transformation. But that also is not a technology success. It's people, change management, use. With all the money we spent and continue to spend on our resources and all the great technology hopefully you'll invent for us, ultimately it's humans making errors that cause us to have big problems. But human performance is something that we deal with every single day. We work in an industry where if somebody makes a mistake, could impact millions of people. We could have fatalities. So I'll give you one quick example, Tom, and team. We do process hazard analysis every single day when we run our plants. Is this process going to be hazardous? We do this analysis. And I think cybersecurity seems to be this black magic art thing. And we said, well, it's another risk. It's a key risk. At this time, it seems to be this incredibly monumental risk. And we have a lady who's 25 years in the US Air Force. She works in the refinery and had worked in the refinery kind of as a hidden gem. And when we elevated cybersecurity, we found that, boy, some of the things she was doing there. Today, we've done 65 PHAs, process hazard analysis, at our sites around the world. So in case something happens, in case the algorithm or the new software you design does not pick the pattern, humans are running these plants. They make decisions every day. Could we help them make better decisions? So, for me, I'm not as perhaps pessimistic. I think the opportunity is, can we help humans make better decisions? Can we take a lot of that, manual process that Tom described on how we tend to do things? Can you help us make better decisions? Ultimately, my sense is that's the better way to go. Technology will change, and you're right. A nation state attacked our company after the Colonial Pipeline for 5 days. We chased them in our network. The team is here, 5 days, and it was incredibly hard. We knew the attribution almost immediately. We had some incredible software and cybersecurity companies involved, not so much to do the post-mortem, but to protect. And I have to tell you, we kicked their butts. They never were able to get into our network. We got rid of them, and it made us stronger, right? So we shared the indicators of compromise. We were very open and transparent. 3 years ago, if you tried to do that with the federal government, you would be worried about overregulation. You would be, what we don't talk about these days is, why is it that private industry did not want to share? Because in some ways it was punitive, right? So I think that's maybe my suggestion would be is, this latest situation in Ukraine is teaching us openness, transparency. The US government and federal agencies should not be sort of in conflict with industry. It's transparency, focus. We have a common objective, so maybe that's the way to go.
I don't know if I can call on Andreas, because he was making some really thoughtful comments about the state of academia after the Ukraine and how you think that academia is more willing to respond to the immediacy of the problems that Tom put out. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Sankar, I do not know what you have in mind, but I do have a few thoughts that probably relate to what you and I were talking about earlier. But thank you both very much for your perspectives. And they are very important right now because, as Sankar said earlier, we're involved in a conversation where we're saying that, let me rephrase a little bit, the thing that everybody's talking about, the world is worried for, as we think about Putin's war in Ukraine, is the nuclear question, right? What does Putin do in case he's cornered? Everybody's talking about nuclear, but nobody's talking about cyber attacks, which is kind of interesting. The world is very resonating toward, well, a nuclear attack is going to kill millions of people. Nobody wants to provoke the other. Well, we heard from Tom, and it's very true, that cyber attacks can take out the infrastructure and cause death to many innocent people in ways that, in many ways, they're not very different from a nuclear conflict. So all of this to say that both of those are threats that are part of today's reality. And if we think about what we need to be doing is the private sector is very important. And I agree with you. All of us felt in the discussion we had with General Moore this morning that the private sector can play a significant role as works closely with the federal government. But the most important thing is that our research enterprise to be, if you wish, empowered to take upon ourselves to think about all you said, transparency. How do we protect the well-being of the world from whoever is a bad actor, whether they are doing it for fun because that's how they get excited, or whether they have an intention that goes against everything that all of us are trying to work for. I think there's a clear and present responsibility, if you wish, for all of us to come together and say, who are the nations that need to lead in making sure that that threat, I'll put nuclear aside, because nuclear plants are part of the power grid as well, right? Let's be realistic about it. An attack on the power grid influences our nuclear energy as well in ways that can be very detrimental. But how about making sure that we make the investments we need to make and say, when it comes to cybersecurity, there is no wait until tomorrow. There is no wait until something bad happens. We need to be ready for something bad now. And so the question is, what is missing right now in terms of the things that we prioritize? United States as a nation, the world, our allies, in order to make that commitment into turning it into action immediately. So that's my question to you. Academia is always very ready to play. We are driven by the fact that when the world is in trouble, academic partnerships provide the glue for keeping us working together toward the good thing. I was talking about all these scientists, brilliant scientists that are leaving their home countries because they don't want to be part of what is happening. Where are they going? We experienced 70 years ago an influx of talent from Europe that we benefited the most as a nation, a lot as a nation. What do we do with those scientists that are ready to leave home and come here and come to the United States? These were the things we were talking about with Shankar. And I think all of us...
the other thing Andreas said, I hope you don't mind. One thing that we heard from General Moore, which was really striking, which got Andreas and me talking, for the first time, Deputy Director of the NSA, of the Cyber Command, said, cybersecurity is, he made an analogy to a boxer, and he said you can't just have offensive and defensive, and in fact, the best boxers combine offense and defense. And that was striking to hear, the NSA has traditionally regarded offense as its domain, and defense as, so to me it was striking. And then, talking with Andreas, sorry, we were, this question 30, 25 years ago, 40 years ago, there was talk about ballistic missile defense and SDI, and that was also, one, there was no separation between offensive and defensive. And I think the conversation is maybe then there was some reservations in academia on working on SDI, but today I think that, as Andreas says, there's a real willingness to engage with more complex versions of this. I hope that's okay with you, Andreas.
Shankar, I apologize. I need to excuse myself and go to another meeting. I think I'm going to see many of you at cocktails and dinner tonight, but unfortunately, we kind of need to wrap this session up. But I want to, thank you all for the work that you're doing. I think that, there's opportunity to save lives here. There's opportunity to save individual liberty here. There's opportunity to save democracy here. And the problems you're dealing with are, in fact, existential. And I know that you've worked on I have had the opportunity to, not read the papers, but read the titles of the papers you've published and the research that you've done. And you know, this work that you're doing on these projects might be the most important thing you do in your professional careers. So thank you for being part of it. Thank you for all you do. And and for Anoop and for and for everyone involved in the C3 family, our colleagues at Microsoft. I mean, it's a great privilege to be associated with you. And so, thank you.
Thank you.